introduce Guillaume. So Guillaume Neau is a military engineer that graduated from Ensta Bretagne in 2017. He supervised information security qualification operations of the military program Scorpion before leading the engineering team that designed the digital identity program of France that led to the renewal of the national identity card from 2018 to 2020, which for sure was also a super exciting and stressful program. Then Guillaume worked and advised the French Minister for the Interior before moving to AWS in August 2021. He designed the information security strategy for the Olympic Games of Paris 2024. So you can also ask him afterwards to these topics, I guess. And contributed in the elaboration of the Ministry of the Interior Strategic White Paper. At AWS, Guillaume helps public organizations of France think, build, and innovate in the cloud. Guillaume's main topic are cloud security, infrastructure as code, and serverless engineering. So let's give him a warm applause. And then, as usual, we'll watch the short trailer, and then we hand over directly to you. And I announce it directly to you, so we will have a steering committee of the chair, so that means I will be upstairs and meet you afterwards. So I'm happy about that, but I will watch the recording afterwards, just that you don't wonder why I leave during your keynote. Okay, good.
Here at AWS, we consider that security is job zero. The purpose of the keynote is to give you all the key to understand the AWS cloud and the associated value proposition regarding information security. I will first introduce AWS and its peculiar vision about cloud computing. I will then explain how to build resilient and secure application on AWS while presenting the key security principles associated to the cloud. We will talk about self-healing system, high availability, serverless, managed services, defense in depth, network security, and security at the edge of agility. At the end of the keynote, you will know most of the security fundamentals of cloud security and will be presented one of the state-of-the-art concept and challenge regarding information security in the cloud. See you on Wednesday, the 1st of December at IoT Meet Cyber.
So, and as usual, we have the Slido. Akin was talking about it in the morning already. Please connect there, ask your questions if you're remotely. If you're in the room, it's still a good idea to put your questions. Just put that you're in the room, then Akin can call you, and the same for the Zoom, so the Zoom participants have the same opportunity. All right, then I'm really looking forward to the talk and hand over to you. You can use this mic here, and if you want to walk around, you can also use this one.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark Oliver. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be standing here with you and in front of you, representing AWS, and to give this keynote about cloud security. Today and this morning, I want to cover 3 areas. First, to give you an overview of the AWS cloud, what we do, and our impact in France. Second, I want to give you an introduction of the core security principles that you need to be taken into consideration when building information system in the cloud. And then I will give you some best practice and security patterns and perspectives for you to better engineer and think through your information security in the cloud. So first, let me introduce you to the AWS cloud. And we need to first define what cloud is all about. At AWS, we define cloud as being on-demand delivery of IT resources with a pay-as-you-go pricing. This is strongly rooted in our DNA, and this is what pushes us forwards. AWS comes from more than 15 years of experience, and if we look at our story, we were once the IT department of Amazon.com, the famous retail store. We have grown ever since, and we are now sharing out our experience building resilient and scalable system with everyone all over the world. We have a service offering that is made of more than 200 services. We covered most of our country in the world, and we are serving today more than 6,500 public institutions with a strong presence in France as well. If we look at our presence in Europe, you can see that we have built infrastructures in 6 European countries, and we have announced the city of Spain to be coming soon, and it will probably open in 2022. In each of these countries, we have built what we call a region, and I will detail afterwards what a region means within AWS, with at least 3 availability zones per regions, and this concept will be key in conceiving resilient system afterwards. Yeah, so the first really critical concept that you need to understand with AWS is the scale at which we operate and the investment that we have made on our infrastructures. Because at the end, when you build system, you rely on the physical infrastructure on which they are built. So there is 3 notions here. There is a notion of regions, of high availability zone, and of points of presence. A region is a geographical presence of AWS that is made of at least 3 availability zones. An availability zone is a collection of a set of data centers, which means it's at least 1 data center, but it can be made of several data centers. And then we have point of presence, which are proxy point to deliver content to the end customer. The thing that is really important to understand is that within one country, we have several availability zones that are made of several data centers. So if you want to deploy multi-site systems for higher resiliency, or if you want to deploy self-healing system, you can do so within one region, and we provide all the mechanisms to do so. I was telling you that we provide more than 200 services. This is an example of what we provide. So naturally, you will find services that are well known, such as Amazon S3, if you need some storage. But there are some lesser known services that are part of our cloud offering, like AWS Ground Station, if you want to rent antenna time in order to communicate with satellites. And we provide as well quantum computing capability with Amazon Brackets. We are here to speak about information security, and here is our service offering about information security. We've tried to focus on 6 strategic pillars of information security, which are identity and access management, detective controls, infrastructure protection, data protection, incident response, and compliance. What is really key here is that all these services are transforming the life of security professionals by enabling each and every builder to implement security best practices quickly and without the need of extensive expertise, which implies that security, which is often perceived as an area of expertise that requires long studies and in-depth knowledge of what you are doing and implementing, it's easier to implement within the cloud. Let me introduce you more specifically to some of my favorite services that are key and really foundational to the security in the cloud. We have AWS KMS, which you can see in data protection, as it is our go-to service to manage encryption and to deploy encryption easily. We have AWS Identity and Access Management, also known as AWS IAM. And essentially, IAM is the core of our security model, since everything is denied in the cloud. And what you essentially must do to allow any actions or any use of services, you have to explicitly grant access and authorization to what we call a principal in the cloud to perform actions like provisioning a virtual machine. We then have CloudTrails. CloudTrails is essentially a service that will give traceability of every action that has been made in the cloud, which is everything that you do in your accounts. For example, when you want to provision a virtual machine, you send a message, an API call to AWS. This API call is then authorized, and then the virtual machine is provisioned. What this implies is that we provide you the trace that you need to conduct cybersecurity investigation, and you have full visibility of the activity of what is happening in your account. All these services won't be anything meaningful if we don't have our customer that are built on AWS. There are many success stories that are to be told, but essentially what I want you to understand is the positive impact that we have in France. Essentially, 8 out of 10 French licornes are built today on top of AWS, and more than 80% of the French biggest capitalization use AWS today, which makes the public cloud both suitable for large-scale company and well-established enterprise, but as well for the small city of Drancy. And here we have two examples that are showing off. Essentially, we have SNCF, a major railway company that started its migration and its digital transformation, moving to the cloud to run more than 60% of its application, some of them very strategic and critical. And the most recent success story of SNCF is that recently it managed to sell more than 1 million tickets in one day due to the scalability of AWS and the resiliency of our infrastructures. Then we have the Mairie of Drancy, and essentially they are using AWS as an enabler for innovation to build secure and smart city with diversified and creative ID, and we are very proud of what they are accomplishing and what we are accomplishing together. Some of their example or some of the systems that they are building is automation of traffic lights, monitoring of the room temperatures of dormitoring for preschoolers, and optimization of the usage of parking place, all by combining IoT at the edge and the compute power of AWS. Now let's jump into core security principle when building in the cloud. The very first thing that needs to be understood is that when you go to the cloud, you will face what we call a shared responsibility model. Essentially, AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, of the underlying infrastructures and physical server that you will use. Here, we are going to speak mostly about the second part, which is your responsibility as a customer, as a user of AWS, which is the security in the cloud. As I said, or as it was mentioned during the introductions, we consider here at AWS that security is job zero, and it is inherent to the model of a public cloud offering. And speaking of the security of the cloud, I want to insist that we own and maintain more than 50 security certifications, among them some of the most demanding in the world. And if we look on Europe, we own the C5 from Germany, HDS from France, GDPR conformity, and SOC 2 level 2. And each and every customer of ours that decide to host its information system on AWS directly inherit from this control, no matter its size or its company or its budgets. And this is a game changer. When we look at the security in the cloud, what you can see is that you still have things that need to be taken into account. You still need to think your data encryption, your traffic encryption, your authorization model. And that I am going to help you better understand and think if ever you were to build the cloud. But the first thing is that this model is fluid, and you can think and you can decide what you want to delegate to AWS. You are always in control in the cloud, and you need to think if either you want to own your security, including OS patching, for example, or if you want to delegate it to your cloud provider and you want to focus on what we call highly differential task. And here we have three models that illustrates the shared responsibility model. On the left, you have a database, typically, that is run on-premise. And if you look at it, when you have your database that's run on-premise, you are responsible for its resilience from the power alimentation of the physical servers on which you have decided to run your database, from the app optimization of the request that you are going to run against it. With virtualized service, essentially the cloud provider takes ownership upward the OS installations of the underlying servers. But when you create your instance, you are responsible for the life cycle of everything that goes upwards, including the life cycle of the operating system. And then we have what we call managed service or serverless services. And here you can choose to delegate even the life cycle and the management of patching and your exploitation system to your cloud provider so that you can rely on up-to-date services and infrastructures. I told you that cloud is also changing the pace at which we need to think security. And essentially, we need to take a step back and to think at how security is done and implemented, especially within a defense program. Usually, a cybersecurity program starts with risk analysis and ends with operation, with qualification operation in between. Such a program for critical systems or complex systems takes usually between 2 or 10 years to be conducted. And if you have obsolescence of vulnerabilities that arise, then you need to deal with emergency. In the clouds, as things are fluid and elastic, the pace at which you need to operate is drastically reduced, and it is a favorable ground to take an agile approach. Essentially, in the cloud, you start with a risk scenario associated with your development, and you end up with security test and continuous evaluation. So that's a security approach in the cloud that is viable, takes between 1 to 3 weeks to deliver provable results on which to iterate to improve your cybersecurity posture. All right, so let's dive now deeper on what you should be doing in the cloud. I've divided this slide into what I consider being core security capabilities that are easy to implement and are more relevant to cybersecurity hygiene, and advanced capability down below that some organizations still struggles to accept, endorse, and to deploy. If we look at it, what you should be really doing. You should be implementing an IAM strategy that follows least privilege principles. And that in itself is complicated because you need to have full control on your user, your temporary user, decide who has the right to do what, and a strong authorization model. You need to ensure that you are logging the correct information in a secure place so that you are capable of doing forensic analysis if ever a security event arises. You need to build on secure, reliable, and segmented infrastructures, and I will detail that afterwards. You need to encrypt and backup your data, and you need to think for disaster you need to think for disaster and create a disaster recovery plan. And since you are operating in the cloud, you can test it. And I highly encourage you to test your disaster recovery plan. Then if we look at advanced security capability, the thing is you have to think at the entire application chain covered by information security processes. This is what we call the shift left. Essentially, you want to deport security control before your software or your code is deployed on your infrastructures. And this is At that moment, that's the DevSecOps approach, which is essentially you want to engage in test-driven development, you want to engage into formal verification, you want to engage with dynamic and static testing of your codes. You want to have a cloud information security policy well designed and well thought that is able to tackle the challenges of the cloud and that deals with all the specificities of the service that we provide. Essentially, it will help the business and your partners to better understand what needs to be done and to position information security as an ally. You need to then think your resilience with a business continuity plan. You need to have recurring and vulnerability assessment and environment scanning. And then you need to be able to exploit your log in order to extract situational awareness and possibly automated response. All right, so now we are going to speak about security pattern and perspective. The very first perspective that I want to bring you today is essentially how easy it is to build resilient services in the cloud. Essentially, in the CIA triad, availability is clearly identified as a key metrics of information security. And we provide services that helps engineers build resilient services backed by our numerous SLA. More specifically, managed services and serverless or cloud-native services are often built capitalizing on the regional infrastructures that I introduced in first part of AWS, hence offering by design an improved resilience at a low cost because they are deployed following highly availability best practices. And this is how it translates. Here, this is what we would do and use to build a really simple website. And this website, by using managed services, would have an availability rate, a built-in availability rate and resiliency of 99.8%. This is already a good numbers, and if you look at the different security referentials, this would be suitable for critical system. But we can push this number a bit higher by capitalizing on, let's say, 2 regions of AWS. So if we deploy these infrastructures and these services on 2 regions, the availability rates of our website jumps from 90.8% to 99.9996%. And this would be perfectly suitable for even the most critical workload. Now, I want to introduce you to the security and the perspective of what we call virtual private clouds, or Amazon VPC. Essentially, we provide our customer a way to build a secure enclave in the cloud and to isolate their network in our cloud from the others. What does VPC provide in terms of security? Is it enables in-depth or defense in-depth best practices by providing native filtering mechanisms that are named security groups and network access control list, abbreviated as NACLs. We provide traffic routing with network gateway, and usually network gateway provide traffic filtering as well. And we provide enhanced observability with flow logs and what we call traffic mirroring, which is essentially you can proxy your traffic to a virtual appliance, do some in-depth packet analysis, decide if the traffic is legitimate or not, and then reroute the traffic to your business logic. How does that translate for enterprise? So essentially, we are going to now leverage the plasticity of the cloud directly in order to enable segmentation of networks and the separation, and both the separation and the filtering of the traffic. Here we have an architecture diagram that essentially leverages this idea. Since building in the cloud is really easy, and we are not hindered by physical infrastructures, we can go and explore secure design architectural patterns. So here, essentially, we have a VPC. We have VPCs that are dedicated to inbound and outbound traffic, and they would be perfectly suitable to deploy filtering appliance. We have a VPC that is dedicated to the corporate connections, of customers. And then we have a VPC that is dedicated to supervision and some VPC that are dedicated for our application. What does that mean is that in the event of a security event or failure or vulnerability, we have limited by design the potential blast radius of an incident at a cost of 0, since all these services and infrastructures doesn't incur charge. Then let's take a deeper dive into one of our application VPC and see how we can secure a very simple application and apply defense in dev's best practices. So here, to help you understand, instances is a web servers, and the blue icon that you can see down below is essentially a database, and we have a load balancer on top. What is important here to understand is that all these, both instances and the database are deployed using multi-site and using mechanisms and automatisms that would make them resilient to failure. Which means, if ever we were to have an incident within the availability zone 1 of the regions, your system, starting with the load balancer, will directly direct the traffic to instances located in another availability zone. And this is how we achieve self-healing system. Because as soon as a defect is detected, the traffic is going to be rerouted and new instances are going to be spun up in other availability zones to ensure better resilience. Now, if we look at how we would filter traffic, we have several mechanisms. The easiest way to do it is to rely on what we call security group. We have 3 security groups that are important here. One of the elastic load balancer, one on instances, and one on the database. What it means is that if well configured, the load balancer can only direct traffic to instances, and instances can only direct traffic to the database. And that is how you isolate your database from entering traffic and lateral propagation of potential attacker or threat actors. Eventually, architectural-wise, I want to give you an overview of API security. I think it is one of your topics, especially if you build with IoT. We provide services in the middle, which is named Amazon API Gateway, to quickly build API. But we also provide tools and mechanisms to secure your API. Among those, we have embedded encryption with AWS KMS, and I gave you an introduction on KMS earlier. We have a web application firewall, which is AWS WAF, to filter requests. We provide native DDoS mitigation with Amazon CloudFront. We support mutual TLS, which is MTLS, with AWS Certificate Manager. We provide, let's say, fine-grained resource permissions from AWS ARM. And all this, where do we stand today? I mean, here you have now an understanding of the foundational of the security in the cloud, but what if you want to conduct research and you want to be researching, let's say, a bleeding edge topic? Essentially, you need to understand that the clouds and the virtualization of resource have allowed the creations of infrastructure using standard API call. This standard API call can be grouped into templates that define the final states of a system that you want to be created. And we have programming language that can create those templates. This is what we call infrastructure as code. And essentially what it allows, functionally speaking, is that you can code, commit, execute, and deploy standardized infrastructures. From a security standpoint, it means that the security property of the infrastructure that you are going to deploy within AWS is already well defined in your code. And what we are missing is formal validation of this security property. As a key takeaway, I'd like you to really understand that the AWS cloud is here in France, but is first and foremost on-demand delivery of IT resources with a pay-as-you-go pricing. According to the shared responsibility model, you can delegate the heavy lifting of information security while inheriting from our control to AWS by strategically deciding to use managed or serverless services. You can build resilient application and infrastructure by leveraging AWS global infrastructures. Highly available and safe systems are easy to build on AWS. And finally, it is easier to build secure application on AWS. Services offer built-in encryption, backup, filtering, and authentication. All right, so that concludes these presentations, and I'm happy to take your questions. And after the question, I can give you an overview of the AWS console. As Mark Oliver said, I will be staying the whole day and tomorrow, and I will be happy to help. I will be happy to provide you AWS account for you to experiment and get familiar with our environment. And I will be happy to help those of you that decide to build on our infrastructures.
So, in case you have questions, I can hand over you the microphone. While you are thinking, actually, I have many questions, but I will try to group them into 2 or 3. My first question is, between your data centers, I presume that you have a private network, that you don't send your packets to the common routers and such. Can you give more details maybe about like if you also have numbers in your mind, how many data centers are we talking about and what kind of connection is needed between them?
This I don't know, because I'm from a division of AWS that is not responsible for operating our data centers. If you look at what I said in this slide about the number of data centers, what we want to keep relevant is the minimum infrastructure that you can rely on. Essentially, within one region, you have 3 availability zones, and in each availability zone, you have a collection of data center, which is within a region, you have at least 3 data centers, 3 different sites that are kept synchronous. But you can have more, of course, because one availability zone is a collection of data centers.
Yeah. Maybe a quick question again from my side. So when it comes to cloud especially, the legal bindings differ from country to country, from Europe to US. So how do you make a compromise? Because this company is working multinational. I mean, you have bindings for each country separately. How do you meet all of them? Do you meet all of them separately, or do you have a common ground?
We have a common ground, and essentially what we try to do and achieve is for AWS to be as self-service as possible, which is we try to limit and to lift the barrier to cloud adoption to the most. Now, certain country or geographical area impose some specific regulation, and depending on what is expecting from us, we evaluate, and then of course we adapt.
Yeah. Okay, any questions from the audience?
Right, maybe I can give you an overview of how to use AWS. Oh, I need a few seconds to connect. Just connecting my phone to my computers, and then we should be good. And then we should be good. There it is. All right. So essentially, oops. So essentially, as a customer, you can start, and everyone can start from a small businesses or a large company, or even you today as an individual. You will be started here, create an AWS account. I already have one, so I will use my account. Okay. Just need to log in. And there it is. Yep, it's going to show up. Perfect. So here you are. So this is the AWS console, the theme for every customer of us. And essentially, if you want, for example, to create a virtual machine, you use the EC2 services. We go to the EC2 dashboards. We click on launch instance. We select an AMI, essentially the operating system that we want our virtual machine to be built on. So I'm going to use Linux. You can select your instance size, which will directly impact the performance. I'm going to use a T3 micro of AWS. Then you can configure some instance detail, more specifically its network configuration, DNS host name, DNS preferred resolution path, CPU options, shutdown behaviors, backups, scripts that you want to run at the start of the instance. You can add storage. Then you can add tag to your instance to better identify it, or to use something that we call attribute-based access control. Then you can configure security groups. And here I have essentially only allowed SSH on port 22. Then you click review and launch. You can launch. Here it is offering me to provision some SSH key. So that would be a good idea, especially to perform administrative tasks. The thing that I don't personally like with SSH is that a port needs to be open and key need to be provisioned. So you need to handled and have a proper key management process in place. So I often recommend and advise not to use SSH key because we provide better tool to effectively administer your virtual machine. And I'm going to show you. Launch instances. And there it is. This is as simple as that. And within minutes, the virtual machine, it is already initializing. And within minutes, the virtual machine will be available and ready to use. And if we want to connect to the virtual machine to perform administrative tasks, we can just use the built-in agent that is deployed with the instance to connect and to perform our task. And we should be good. Yep. And there it is. We are within our virtual machine. So that concludes the keynote and my presentation. Happy to have a chat with you afterwards and to help you build on AWS.
So they say it's a bit, there is a small critic for AWS, like it's demanding and it's really challenging to work at AWS. How does it feel like for you?
Yes, I mean, to be honest with you, it's a company that never sleeps. Yeah. So yes, it's we have a lot of things going on. We are pioneering the cloud, so there is a lot of ideas that are always worth to explore. Yeah. We are getting a lot of solicitations from our customer because the more they grew on AWS, the more capable they become, the more ideas they have, and the more challenging they become. So yeah, it's a fast-paced environment. We are always recruiting. If you want to join us, be happy to apply. And yeah. And it feels good to see the positive impact that we are having for the public sectors, but also for SNCF.
Yeah. Must be not easy to stay #1 ahead of Google or Microsoft. So probably thanks to employees like you. Then I would like to hand you a small gift from our side as a thank you gift. Thank you for your keynote and for the small hands-on that you showed us. Last time, if you don't have any questions, we can give him a warm applause.